Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Feed Me, High Street Creeps. Okay then, so I've just come off the heels of reviewing Feed Me's debut album from 2013, Calamari Tuesday. If you're interested in hearing an introduction to this artist, I've linked that video in the description. And I did mention then, since that video was in such close proximity to a new Feed Me album on the way, I was probably going to cover this one too, so here we are, I'm talking about the new album. Why not? Obviously, I wouldn't consider myself a longtime fan of Feed Me. I only heard Calamari Tuesday for the first time for that requested video. And I've only kind of skimmed through his EPs and haven't really properly sat down with any of them all the way through. But I could tell just from the packaging of this one that it was gonna be a bit higher profile than the other stuff. Like, here we go, a proper second album that was meant to be a big event, much like Calamari Tuesday was back in 2013. Now, I was wondering how a new Feed Me album would work in 2019, though. I mean, spoilers, I did like that debut album, but I feel like it was very much a product of its time. Even if you hadn't told me it came out in 2013, I'd be able to tell pretty easily. It's like one of the most 2013 things I've ever heard. Not to say it wasn't good for what it was, but those styles aren't really in anymore in 2019. The kind of rough, aggressive electro house and modern dubstep that became Feed Me's bread and butter isn't really where the EDM scene of today lies anymore. So this could go one of two ways. He could either stick to what he knows best and risk looking like he's been stuck in the past, which, you know, given the album cover, could be a bit of a self-aware possibility. But I felt it was a lot more likely he was going to move out of his comfort zone and try new things. Try to keep up with the times. I was kind of afraid that might also lead to a sophomore album that felt like a bit of a watered-down and trendier version of what brought his original appeal in the first place. And upon actually hearing High Street Creeps, well, that's kinda what happened, but I don't know, it didn't really feel like an attempt to keep up with the times like I thought it would be. In some ways, I think High Street Creeps is actually a noticeable improvement on Calamari Tuesday. I mean, none of the gripes I had with that album show up on this follow-up. I thought his debut was a product of its time. This album doesn't sound directly attached to the 2013 sound or the 2019 sound. He's just doing whatever he feels like doing, and it still sounds like Feed Me. And perhaps more importantly, I thought his debut was on the long side and had a bit too many tracks that sounded too much like each other, weighed down the experience more than it needed to. High Street Creeps gets in and gets out really quickly. Just 10 tracks, and all 10 sound pretty distinctive in their own right. It doesn't lose my attention or run out of steam like the debut kind of did in its second half. I mean, you could say that this album ends up feeling more like a random mishmash of tracks than a real album, but, you know, I mean, vast majority of more popular EDM albums don't really try that hard to make everything fit together super cohesively, so, you know. If the tracks are good, then the tracks are good, I'll take it. And of the 10 tracks, I'd say I really enjoyed 9 of them. May as well get that one I didn't like out of the way real quick. I did not care for the track Till the Wheels Come Off much at all. I thought that one was really bland and generic and plain, used the 4 chords of pop. That's mainly the one thing that killed it about me. Also, the singer Graham Fink was kind of an underwhelming attempt at some kind of indie rock kind of crossover appeal too. I could do without that track, and I mean, this style was done better both on his debut and even on this album. You can just cut out Till the Wheels Come Off entirely as far as I'm concerned, but the other 9 songs on this album are all pretty good. I was initially a bit let down by the lack of rougher electro house-ish tracks that seemed to most be his thing. Really only got Barrel Roll and Satanic Panic in that department. Of course, those two are pretty fun, as you'd hope. The latter in particular has a bit of a Ghosts and Stuff-ish feel to it in its build-ups, and a drop that at first I found to be a bit of a letdown, but like Ebb and Flow from the debut, I ended up growing on pretty quickly. Even more quickly this time. I guess you also got Sleepless, as maybe a bit of that 2014 sound coming back, and the drop again didn't go as hard as I hoped it would. But this also ended up growing on me with repeat listens. It was one of the catchier ones. The Sleepless Far From Home hook was pretty memorable, I guess. As for the other tracks on here, on average, everything's a bit more toned down than the typical track you'd find on his debut, but not by a huge amount. The opener Perfect Blue had some pretty cool melodic moments, and the super low mixed Japanese voice in the background leads me to believe the title is a direct reference to the Satoshi Kon film, which is a pretty cool reference, I guess. This track did have a couple of trap hi-hats I wasn't as huge on, but still not bad. Shimmer was some nice solid techno, a bit more minimalistic than the usual from him, which I thought was a nice change of pace. You also got Pumpkin Eyes featuring Caney, which tries the indie rock crossover thing till the wheels come off track, but with much more successful results. Mainly thanks to the lack of generic forward chords progressions. So yeah, I'm detecting maybe a bit of, M83 influence here, especially with those high-pitched wailing. I think I might even like this one more than Love Is All I Got, so yeah, this is definitely one of the big highlights from this thing. And another big highlight was Own Ghost. It was a weird, off-kilter experimental moment with all this super chopped up and glitched news anchor voice running through it. That was a really fun one, and bizarrely enough, I think that one might even be catchier. Certainly the one that ran through my head the most easily. There's of course the big lead single, Feel Love, featuring Rosie Doonan. It's basically a Cascade track with extra instrumentation. Really soft and mellow house stuff, but, I like Cascade. This was pretty cool too. And finally, Defiant basically aims to close the album in the same way Calamari Tuesday ended with Last Requests. A more emotional track with a female guest vocalist. This one admittedly didn't go over quite as well, but it was still pretty solid. Certainly probably the best place to finish this album. So yeah, a lot of good tracks on this thing. That said, there's only so much I can really get enthusiastic about it, because, even though there's only the one track that I didn't like, there's also no tracks on here that I loved. Calamari Tuesday had 2 tracks I loved, with Death by Robot and Lonely Mountain, and maybe Last Request came kinda close, but here, none of them really hit that same level for me. They're all good, but none of them are great or amazing or really blew me out of the water. Did I have fun with this album? Absolutely, but do I see it having much of any longevity? No. I'm probably not going to remember most of this album once this video goes up, and it'll probably drop through the cracks or something, but, between the general consistency, quality-wise, save for that one really quick dip into mediocrity, and the fact that this album more or less addresses all the qualms I had with his debut, I feel more inclined to give it a pass. It's probably not an essential listen unless you're already a fan of the guy, and again, if you're not into more mainstream styles of EDM, then don't even bother, but I thought this was enjoyable. If he makes a third album that has the catchiness and immediacy and aggressiveness of his debut, but the general size and scope and variety of this one, or just made an album out of the best tracks from both, you could possibly end up with something in the 8 range for me. This isn't anything mind-blowing, but whatever, it's better than I expected. So, yeah, this was pretty cool. I'm gonna go with a solid 7 out of 10 on this one. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list, or make me a review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.